Okay, so recently I have actually uploaded my new video on why I switched from the traditional Premiere background to the newly Blackmagic Designs DaVinci Resolve. So in that video, I have actually said that iPad processors are really better than any other processor inside a tablet, and Apple would actually put this processor inside the MacBooks, which was really obvious for me and the whole industry till here. But a lot of people said that why did you say that to me, and a lot of people were messaging me, and it's really hard to get back to everyone and explain the whole thing. So I decided to make this short video, which is kind of a really geeky stuff on technology. So if you bear with me, I'll try to make this as interesting as possible. So in order to understand what is actually happening inside this M1 chips, we need to understand what is actually happening inside the industry. And I'm not saying the Apple industry, I'm saying about the silicon industry, the whole innovation of the silicon industry. So in order to understand what is actually happening, we need to understand why this processor is really, really good. So in order to understand why this processor is really good, we need to understand the history of processors. So processors are primarily divided into two types. That is the ARM processor and the x86 processors. ARM processors are really small and really need a less power input. And on the other hand, the x86 processors are really complex and really need a high power input. Apart from that, ARM's processor run a codec or computing known as RISC computing, that is the reduced instruction set of computing. And the x86 processor run on a computing known as CISC computing, which is complex instruction set of computing. Okay, so it really explains itself. So in this tech industry, we have this pseudo image about whenever we need to process anything really big, we need to have a really high voltage and really high complex computing or high complex coding. It is much like Ujala in Indian mines, which is Ujala is not a thing. It's actually a cleaning solution which is owned by a company known as Ujala. But when you actually go to any place, we actually say to the shopkeeper, we need Ujala, which is not really technically true because we need a cleaning solution, not the Ujala as the company. Okay. Much like JCB. JCB is also a company, but everyone has this pseudo image. This is JCB. Okay. So much like that, this tech industry has this pseudo image that in order to process anything big, you need a high voltage and a high complex coding. Okay. So Apple actually was the company which actually invest in the right asset, and it really makes the asset really popular. In the case of touchscreen smartphones, if you don't know, touchscreen smartphone was not a really new technology. It was actually an existing technology, but Apple made it famous by inventing the new iPhones. That is the first generation iPhones, which is completely touch phones. Before that, it was the Motorola flip phones, which was a really market chaser at that time. Okay. Over the years, Apple had their own chipsets, which was a really good thing. And at 2006, Steve Jobs made this amazing speech, which was
with the future PowerPC roadmap. And that's why we're going to do this. When we look at Intel, they've got great performance, yes, but they've got something else that's very important to us. Just as important as performance is power consumption. And the way we look at it is performance per watt. For 1 watt of power, how much performance do you get? And when we look at the future roadmaps projected out mid-2006 and beyond, what we see is the PowerPC gives us sort of 15 units of performance per watt. But the Intel roadmap in the future gives us 70. And so this tells us what we have to do.
From that point onwards, MacBooks also have an Intel processor in them. So before that period, that was the 2006 speech, MacBook have their own classification inside laptops. Because at that time, the major brands were IBM, Intel, and Apple. So Apple have this big image that their computer or the remote PC was the best in their class because it was really light at that time and it really made the process done really smooth. because they have an ecosystem which they actually designed for their own processor. And after this big speech, they tied the company with Intel and they took the processors which were running on x86, because in traditional speaking, if you want to upgrade your computer game, you need a bigger processor which consumes a lot of voltage or a lot of electricity and have a high complex instructions. So a couple of years passed, and at that time Steve Jobs actually said to the Intel CEO that whether we should invest our R&D on making a ARMS processor better than making a x86 processor, because he knew that this was actually not a very good insight or a good leap of faith if you're going for x86 processors. But Apple always had this solution in mind that ARMS processor was much better. Why? If you see the graph here, you can see why. So if you see the world as it is, you can see that the smartphones are becoming better and better every generation, from the normal iPhones to the Galaxy phones to the newly phones which have immense power, and the benchmark results and everything is a different thing to ask. So you can see that the amount of change or amount of upgrade of performance that you can get on a smartphone over the years will be much bigger compared to the amount of upgrade of performance that you can see on a traditional PC setup. So Mac or Apple was actually thinking, why not actually use that processor, that is the ARMS processor, to power up a laptop. So that was a simple innovation that they did regarding the M1 chip. So traditionally every laptop was running on an x86 chip. This M1 chip is actually running on an iPhone chip. That is the A10 chip, which is kind of upgraded with the new R&D, and they actually upgraded the ARMS chip to actually run a computer. It's that simple. So people out there can't actually dissolve or digest the fact that a mobile processor cannot actually beat a PC processor. But it was really obvious, because at the time iPhone 11 was released, Jonathan, the famous YouTuber, actually released this video exporting a clip, 4K clip on a PC and exporting the same clip on an iPhone 11.
Check this out. This is a fairly capable machine. It's got 10 cores, it's got a beefy GPU, and what I have here is Sony FX9 HDR 10-bit footage. We're gonna start that. I'm gonna throw this open. We're gonna see a couple things, right? We're gonna see the CPU cores just spike up, and you should start hearing the fans. Now, in the meantime, while this thing is chugging along, I have the iPhone 12 mini, little guy. Keep in mind, this thing is still slowly chugging along. I'm going to open up iMovie, create a movie. The first thing you notice is just the scrubbing and the playback, right? So this is a fanless, teeny tiny iPhone 12 and just butter. So what I'm going to do is take that, export, make sure we're in 4K, on 20% battery, HDR. Keep in mind, this thing's still going. It's got a nice little head start, right? So this is on a battery, about 20% left, no fan, and this is a decked out iMac.
So you can see that the difference. So at that time, everyone who has a rudimentary knowledge on technology was wondering why this switch was not happening, and upon the years it actually happened. Okay, that is the new M1 chip. So the second question that I get asked a lot is whether or not to buy the new MacBook Air with the new M1 chips. So the thing is, there are pros and cons. The pros are the chipset is really good, and Apple has made an ecosystem so good so that every part, that is the RAM, processor, the motherboard, really works hand in hand, and the performance will be really good. And benchmark is not the rudimentary standard for measuring a device's performance. It is just a paper thing. Okay, if you see smartphones of Android like OnePlus and Samsung, and if you compare with smartphones of Apple, which is the iPhone, you can definitely see in papers, that is according to the benchmarks, you can see that Android will have a better hand. They have more RAM, they have more clock speed, and they have more benchmark score in paper. But if you use an iPhone, you can see the difference. You can feel the difference because the system works so much better. People who are not really versed with what is happening inside a system, the thing is like Android actually is planning a city from where it is left, like Bangalore or something, which is actually constructed and you construct on top of it, while Apple ecosystem is more of constructing a city like Rome or a city of Gujarat, where we actually make the city from scratch, from the sewers to the streets to the buildings. So Apple is actually making the system so that its motherboard, it's made from Apple, its RAM is made from Apple, its processor, it's made from Apple, so that this integration between these components are really smooth, effective, and in turn will get a better performance. On the other hand, the Android phones usually have different parts of different companies with different technology backgrounds. So what happens is motherboard will be of a different company, the RAM set will be of a different company, the processor will definitely be of a different company. So the ecosystem that actually happens inside the phone or laptop is not really good. That's why the performance cannot be peaked. On the other hand, now Apple actually went to its root and actually they embrace their history of making the product really close connected inside their the whole inside the box, so that every component actually communicates and works hand in hand with each other, so that the whole processing or the whole efficiency of the system will be really high. So that is the main reason why you should buy this M1 chip. But the con is that if you look at this new Mac Air, it's a Mac Air, it's not a Mac Pro, so it's a beta testing device. So what is beta testing? Beta testing is nothing but the producer of Mac or the developer or any person who is making a system will actually give the system to the public or to the customers, and they are essentially hoping the customers to give the feedback so that they can titrate on the system and make it smoother. So people who don't have much money or who don't have much investment to really play around, then I recommend you guys to wait a little bit longer, because if you wait like 3 to 6 months, two things will happen. One is that the tested device will be much smoother and will be much more efficient to run every app out there. The second thing is the price will get higher than what is actually listed now. So that is a downfall. If you wait, the price would get high, but the newer processor will be much better than the new M1 processor, because a lot of R&D will be put on the time frame, and this processor will be upgraded to a next level. Okay, so that's my standpoint, where I think what is actually happening inside the Apple company and what is actually happening inside the whole world.
So what does this mean? This whole new movement of the newer design processors. One thing that we can be absolutely sure is that in the near future, Intel will actually adopt this technology. That is, they will switch from the traditional x86 processors to the new ARMS designs processors. And that is a good thing. That is, you can actually buy laptops and PCs which are much cheaper. Those are sold by Apple.
So this is my standpoint on the new M11 chips on Mac Air, and if this video actually finds you at the right time and right place, and it actually helps you out in making a decision, then definitely like the video so that I can get a notification that it actually helped a person. And if you are into talking this kind of geeky stuff, then comment on the comment section so that we can actually connect and talk about it. Otherwise, if you have any queries also, just comment on the comment section so that we can talk. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel, and if you want to be updated on these kind of in-depth knowledge on the reason behind predictions and a lot of in-depth knowledge on editing, then definitely subscribe to the channel. And I hope to see you guys on the next video I make. Peace out.